Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this presentation of the financial results for 2016. A big thank you to all the journalists following us online on YouTube and on our website, Renault.com. By the way, regarding the data of this presentation and including the forecast is subject to this disclaimer. We have three parts. Mrs. Delbos, the CFO, will present the financial results for 2016. Then Mr. GHOSN, our CEO, will give us his view on 2016 as a whole and the outlook for 2017. And then there will be a Q&A session. And we will indeed take questions online. And you are free to send your questions at the email address listed up on the screen. And you can also follow us on Twitter and interact with the hashtag, I beg your pardon, Renault results. Mrs. Delbos, it's all yours. Good morning, everyone. Thanks to the success of our new models, but also a positive environment in Europe, I'm delighted to announce that we reached, or indeed over and did better than our objectives from 2016. Our revenue for the first time is past 51 billion euros, and our operating margin stands at a record 6.4%. Before looking at the financial results, I would like to start with a quick review of the sales performance published on 17 January. And to make things simpler, when referring to the automotive branch for 2016, this will be not including Aftervas. The sales were up 374,000 units, up 13.3% at 3.18 million units in a context of a recovery of the European market in spite of challenging conditions in emerging markets. In this environment, our business outside Europe was in fact our growth engine, up 15.3% for registrations, compared with 11.8% for Europe as a whole. All the regions outside Europe displayed stable or positive results in terms of registrations. The two main growth engines were AMI, up 36.4%, and Asia Pacific, up 34.5%. This performance is essentially due to the success of recent launches. In the AMI region, our performance is the result of the successful launch of Kwid in India and our growth in Iran. In Asia Pacific, we had in China the launches of our first cars built there, Kadjar and Koleos, and in Korea, we have a satisfactory launch of SM6, QM6, and a good performance of SM6. In Eurasia, our registrations were up 2.3%, the market being down 6.3%. Our performance in Russia was down 2.6%, but the market was down 10.8%, whereas Turkey and Romania were up. In the Americas, even though demand was down, we were able to maintain volume because of the good performance in Argentina and the overall success of our product range. Let's move on to the actual sales. The automotive branch sales were up 13.7% to 48,995 million euros. As to the revenue of RCI Bank, that is our own bank, it was up 1.3% at 2.248 billion euros for the period. If you look at the sales, you have as follows. On the left-hand side, the first bar is volume, with a positive effect of 8.9 percentage points. The geographic mix is slightly favorable at 0.2 percentage points, reflecting lower growth in regions with lower prices, notably Americas and Eurasia. Third positive element is the model mix. The positive impact was 0.7 percentage points, 312 million euros. This is because of the positive effect of the recently renewed models in Europe, but this was offset by the success of Kwid in India, whose price is sold below average. I beg your pardon. The fourth element is the price effect, was up 3.9 percentage points. This is because of increased prices in emerging countries to compensate for the forex effect and the improvement of prices in European products. The sales to partners was a positive factor for our growth in revenue. During the period, there were 2.5 points added, 1.099 billion euros, the success of Nissan Rogue, partly built in our Korean plant in Busan, and significant growth in business in the CKD business account for this. The next item is the Forex effect. Negative impact, 1.686 billion euros, minus 3.9 points. This is still an improvement compared to what we had at end September because of a favorable development in certain currencies in the emerging markets. The other items, 1.4 points, mostly non-car businesses, parts and accessories in our own distribution networks. Looking at operating margin on the business-by-business basis, automotive branch was up 54% at 2.386 billion euros compared with 1.546 billion euros last year. We continued improving our operative margin in H2, upwards of 5% compared with 4.7% in H1. Overall, operating margin for automotive was 4.9%, an improvement from 1.3 percentage points. RCI Bank contributed 896 million euros to the performance, up 8.1%. All in all, the operating margin for the group is up 907 million euros at 3.282 billion euros, 6.4% of revenue compared with 5.2% in 2015. This is a new record for Renault, above the 5% objective. Let's take a closer look at operating margin or operating profit. Let's look from left to right. Lower costs made a positive contribution to the tune of 72 million euros. Our monozukuri activities, which make a positive contribution to operating margin to the tune of 184 million euros, were offset by costs, higher costs than expected, and of course launch costs. Moreover, we decided to step up our R&D expenses for new technologies and new models. Overheads also up 112 million euros. Raw materials, commodities, positive effect, 331 million euros. The price of raw materials were down in the first half of 2016, but of course the trend turned around at year's end, and it's more than likely that this negative trend will continue this year. The mix enrichment block made a positive contribution of 150 million euros compared with a negative impact of 379 million euros last year. This is because of the prices of new product, but also higher prices in emerging countries. It should be noted that this indicator was offset by advertising costs and the many launches that took place in 2016. The volume and sales to partner had a positive effect, 1.36 billion euros, 1.036 billion euros, because of higher registrations and CKDs. RCI Bank and other business were up 55 million euros because of the positive contribution of 104 million euros of RCI, not including the Forex effect, which I'll mention later. Finally, the Forex effect precisely was strongly negative, 702 million euros, mostly because of the negative effect of the Argentinian peso and pound sterling. Let's take a look at the other expenses and income. This year, the effects are almost neutral. The benefit of 1 million euros with both positives and negative. On the plus side, we have a profit of 325 million because of the accounting results of the consolidation of AvtoVAZ. On the minus side, we had to recognize restructuring costs and charges related to the multi-annual agreement with the unions in France. If you look at all these charges, our operating profit stands at 3.283 billion euros compared with 2.176 in 2015. Financial result, we have the net charge 100, that is the interest, 102 million euros compared with the last year at 323 million euros, mostly because of the higher cost of debt in South America. Let's look at the effects of associated companies. Nissan contributed 1.741 billion euros to the 2016 results. This is down 235 million euros compared with last year. Nissan's performance was penalized by a one-off charge related to a supplier of airbags. The part of Renault in AvtoVAZ's performance is negative, 89 million euros, compared with a loss of 620 million euros last year. This 531 improvement is partly due to the operating performance of AvtoVAZ, but also a reduction in asset impairments that were recognized this year compared with last year. For the first time, the results of AvtoVAZ will be, for the last time, they will be presented as associated companies, but next year they will be fully integrated. Now, let's take a closer look at the P&L. The tax is in 2016 is 1.055 billion euros compared with 366 million last year. This is because of the higher performance, net income before taxes, in particular in France. We also have recognized a number of deferred taxes because of changes in the accounting and tax rules. All in all, net income after taxes was up significantly, 3.543 billion euros, more than 600 million more than in 2015. In percentage terms, we're looking at a record high of 6.9% in 2016. So that's the P&L. Let's look at the cash position. Our cash flow stands at 4.362 billion euros, up 911 million euros because of the higher operating profit. The change in WCR had a positive effect of 356 million euros, even though stocks increased. The intangible capex was up stood at 3.611 billion euros, up 530 million euros compared with 2015. All in all, free cash flow is positive at 1.107 billion euros. Regarding dividends from listed companies through the year were 772 million euros, whereas dividends paid out stood at 794 million euros. The buyback of Nissan shares made a positive contributions to the tune of 1.119 billion euros. Other financials include results in a negative flow of 940 million euros, mostly because of the recapitalization of AvtoVAZ, but also acquisitions and forex effects on our cash positions. The consolidation of AvtoVAZ had a negative effect of 1.205 billion euros on our net cash position for automotive. All in all, and including AvtoVAZ, however, the cash position was up 59 million euros at 2.720 billion euros. Finally, about RCI Bank, the new loans extended for the period were up 15% at 17.9 billion euros, reflecting strong business in Europe and a higher penetration rate for new cars. The average level of assets was up 16% at 33.3 billion euros. Net banking income stood at 4.41%, down 34 percentage points because of the geographic mix and the forex effect. The cost of risk remained stable at a record 31 basis points compared with 33 in 2015. All in all, net income before tax was 2.74%, compared with 2.97% in 2015. That concludes my presentation. I'll now give the floor to Mr. GHOSN.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you very much, and good morning to all of you. I would like to share my analysis of the results of 2016 before we look at the outlook for 2017 and beyond. 2016 was a very good year for the Renault Group. We achieved record growth, we achieved record profitability, and also we have a record cash position. So for the very first time, Renault has delivered record results 2 years in a row, 2015 and 2016. As you've just heard, our 2016 revenue came to 51.2 billion euros, and our operating margin was at a historic level of 6.4%, and our net margin was at 6.9%, and that is at the highest level of the automotive industry. Our financial discipline, which we have continued to use for many years now, has meant that our operating cash flow came to 1.1 billion euros. With 3.18 million vehicles registered in 2016, or 300 and 74,000 extra sales compared to 2015, Renault, with the consolidation of AvtoVAZ, which is being done from the beginning of this year, as you know, became the #1 French automotive group worldwide. Our sales and our market share have gone up in every region. The Renault brand has also kept its position as the world's leading French automotive brand, while at the same time progressing in Europe, where we are now ranked second. Finally, the alliance, which now extends to Mitsubishi Motors, sold more than 9.96 million vehicles in 2016, which is just 170,000 vehicles less than the leaders, if you exclude their sales of AGVs and trucks, which should not be integrated into this statistic. So what are the main lessons for 2016? We have continued the momentum that we initiated in 2015 with the new products, and the new Megane and the new Scenic successfully completed our C segment renewal, and our D segment cars, which was also successfully renewed with the Talisman and the new Espace, has had record world sales up by 74%, 145,000 vehicles sold. And in response to the needs of emerging markets, we've also added several models and variants to our crossover range. We have reviewed the design of the Renault Captur for it to be more adapted to the Russian and South American markets, and we've also defined the Kadjar and the Koleos for our customers in China. And in the extension of our overall offensive on the market of LCVs, we've also entered the new segment of pickups. After the launch of the Duster Orok, a half-ton pickup that was launched in 2015, we launched the Renault Alaskan, a one-ton pickup, and LCV sales in Latin America have increased by more than 50% and stand at 60,000 units. The consolidation of AvtoVAZ was another achievement of 2016. In December, we took part in the recapitalization of AvtoVAZ by the side of our partner Rostec, and simultaneously, AvtoVAZ launched a new midterm plan in order to recover its performance both operationally and financially. Thanks to this plan and thanks to the renewal of the Lada range, we think that the AvtoVAZ should come back to operational profitability in 2018 in a Russian market which should come back to a level of 2 million units in 2020. Now, let me remind you that the brands of the alliance, Lada, Renault, Nissan and Datsun, today represent 1/3 of the Russian market, which is still a very high potential growth market for us. As you can see, 2016 was a great year for Renault, but in order to understand these results, we have to go further back in time. This has been actually the result of years of efforts and discipline in the execution of our strategic plan, Renault Drive the Change, that have led to the fruits of this today. Our Drive the Change plan was supposed to fulfill two objectives measured in 2017, 50 billion euros of turnover, and our profitability was to be improved with an operating margin of a minimum of 5%. Our results have outstripped both these objectives with actually a year ahead of time. In 2010, which was the reference year of our plan, our turnover was 38.9 billion euros with an operating margin of 2.8%, and we had a financial debt of 1.4 billion euros. And 6 years later, it is quite clear that we have achieved what we set out to achieve in spite of many headwinds. For example, 2010 to 2016, we had very adverse variations in exchange rates that cost us 2 billion euros, and we had a very big crises that struck our emerging markets like Russia, Brazil, Argentina, or Iran, and that meant, of course, that sales of cars collapsed in these markets. However, we have stayed the course with our eyes fixed on our long-term potential, and we have set up the right measures in order to improve the competitiveness of the company. And this was difficult in Iran as well as in Russia this year, but the company is sitting on an incomparable base that is much more robust today, with a potential of growth that's already been invested in. Now, we're going to be using several levers, and of course, we have used, in the past several levers. The first, of course, was renewal of our range. Over the last 6 years, we've launched 32 new vehicles, including a range of electric vehicles. We have enriched and extended our range. We've gone into new segments such as crossovers and pickup trucks, while at the same time renewing and modernizing our best-known models such as the Scenic, the Espace, or the Megane. Therefore, our offer today is more diversified and our regional mix is better balanced. In 2011, most important markets where we sold more than 100,000 cars were made up of just 8 countries, including 5 European countries. In 2016, we went beyond 100,000 cars sold in 11 countries, including Brazil, Russia, Turkey, Korea, Iran, and India. In 2016, we continue to invest. We achieved a record market share in Brazil in a very difficult context. In Iran, we also found our volume of sales. We came back to the same volume of sales as in 2012, with almost 110,000 vehicles sold, and we won 3.5 points of market share. And our investment strategy in production and local sourcing has also paid off and has helped our competitiveness and our growth. From 2010 to 2016, we built plants in Tangiers in Morocco, Oran in Algeria, Wuhan in China, and also we launched our very first common plant of the Alliance in Chennai in India. We have also very carefully adapted our vehicles to the needs of each market. We have developed regional technical centers in order to ensure that we have the right vehicles. Quid was 97% locally sourced and is going to be well adapted not just to India but also to other markets, starting with Latin America in 2017. The third lever was our sales to partners. From 2010 to 2016, these sales contributed 40% to the growth of our turnover. The increase of production accelerated competitiveness in our industrial sites of the Renault Group, especially in France. We have just launched the production of the Micra in Flins, and we are continuing to produce the Nissan Rogue in our plant in Busan in South Korea. In Sandouville, Renault is building LCVs for General Motors and for Fiat, and we are also assembling the Citan for the Mercedes in Maubeuge on the same platform that is used for the Kangoo. Now, the growth of our sales and the production for our partners has made it possible for us to achieve a level of the use of our industrial capacity which is 100%, which represents an unprecedented performance for the group. The fourth lever is, of course, effects of scale. Over the last 6 years, the development of common platforms has made it possible for us to build more vehicles in more countries and at lower costs and at lower investment rates as well. In order to reduce our R&D costs, we developed a modular design approach, and in 2016, the components of the Alliance CMF platform represented 60% of the costs of the vehicle compared to less than 10% at the beginning of the plan. And 75% of the engines used by the Renault were shared within the Alliance. Another example is the Quid that was built on the CMF-A platform in the Alliance, belonging to the Alliance, launched in Chennai in India and shared with Datsun. We have just deployed that platform in our plant in Curitiba in Brazil in order to launch production of a South American version. Another example are our C&D platforms that have become a single Alliance platform on which we have produced the Kadjar and the Koleos in China, as well as other vehicles in Europe and in South Korea. Of course, I should also mention our agreements with our labour partners, which were essential and vital to the return of the competitiveness of Renault in France, and will continue to be so. In 2013, when we signed our first agreement, it was a very new approach, and the climate was a difficult one. And the era we are living in today seemed very far away then. But of course, we had to ensure that our industrial sites were sustainable, and thanks to the commitment of our trade union organizations who signed the agreement, the objectives were relayed on all of our sites, and everywhere our employees were mobilized. And therefore, in 3 years, our production in France has gone up by 50%. We have recruited 3 times more employees than initially planned. That is 3,000 people. In 2016, we have come back to competitiveness, and social dialogue is continuing. We signed a new agreement in January with the CFE, CGC, the CFDT, and the FO. And over the last 3 years, over the next 3 years, we will be investing 500 million euros in order to improve our performance and working conditions in France. And by 2019, we are going to be recruiting 3,600 more people, 1,800 of whom will be recruited this year, with 6,000 young youth contracts, and 220 million euros will be devoted to training. And it is because we want to remain competitive and we want quality of life to be important that we have decided to undertake a transformation project for the Techno Center, where working methods, management and tools will be modernized and placed at the service of innovation and performance. We know that if we want to be the best in the world, we have to first of all be strong in France. The common platforms, better usage of industrial capacity, and commonalization has stimulated our competitiveness and contributed to cost reductions, another major lever of the plan. Over the last 6 years, 3 billion euros was saved thanks to monozukuri activities. We also worked on all of the value chain of the vehicle, from engineering, manufacturing, supplies, and logistics. In 2016, to give you an example, our ratio of local sourcing was up to 80% in India, and in China it went beyond 60% in Russia, a market where local sourcing is traditionally very difficult for all car makers. Now, as planned, we also reinvested a large part of these savings generated by the monozukuri program in the enrichment of our products. We have invested on what creates value for our customers. We have also fixed much higher requirements for ourselves in terms of quality and customer satisfaction. We've made efforts to modernize our design, which today has become the very first reason why people buy our cars. We were the very first to invest in electric vehicles, and today we are leaders in EVs in Europe. Within the alliance, we are leaders actually worldwide in EVs. Our current range is the most competitive on the market, both in terms of price and diversity of the offer, going from the Twizy to the LCVs, the Kangoo ZE or the Master EV. And the new Zoe 40 gives the highest range of all the electric vehicles at affordable prices on the market. We've introduced technological innovations within our B and C, D segment vehicles, like touch screens and the MediaNav and R-Link multimedia systems. For our top-of-the-range versions, we have also equipped our vehicles with multi-sense and 4-control solutions, which improve driving comfort. This effort of enrichment has turned out to be a very fruitful one in Europe, where with a more modern and more competitive range, we have really taken advantage of the recovery of the market. Our position has been reinforced, and we have a market share that is at 10.6%. Therefore, the growth of Renault is more global, more durable, and more profitable. Now, if we take a look at our outlook for 2017, I'll start with the opportunities and risks that we have identified. The first opportunity, of course, is to take advantage of the full year effect of the renewals and launches of 2016, and we'll have to add the new launches in 2017 of the Alpine and the Duster, and 9 product events worldwide. The second opportunity is the synergies within the alliance, for which we confirm that our objective is going to be of 5.5 billion euros in 2018, and this is just Nissan, not Mitsubishi, because we are looking at synergies with Mitsubishi today, and we will announce the figures for that later on. Lastly, the third opportunity is the recovery of emerging markets, especially those which had achieved very low levels, and in which we have built our presence over time, like in Russia. As far as risks are concerned, the very first one is that of raw materials, for which we think that the prices will continue to rise throughout the year. The second risk concerns uncertainties linked to the Brexit and the depreciation of the pound sterling. The last risk concerns uncertainties that today are weighing on all trade agreements worldwide. For 2017, we think that the worldwide TIV will be up 1.5 to 2% compared to 2016. The European market is probably going to grow by 2%, and the same will be true in France. Internationally, the Brazilian and Russian markets should be stable, whereas China should be up 5% and the Indian market up 8%. In this context and after the consolidation of AvtoVAZ, the objective of the Renault Group is to increase its turnover beyond the impact of AvtoVAZ and to increase the operational result of the group in euros, and also to generate operational free cash flow for the automotive branch. Now, beyond 2017, I would like to share a few thoughts with you. As you know, our industry is undergoing some major changes, and by 2030, the electric vehicles will represent 25% of sales of new cars in urban zones, and practically all vehicles will be connected to the internet. You will hardly be surprised to hear me tell you that tomorrow's vehicle is going to be an electric vehicle, a connected vehicle, and an autonomous vehicle. In addition to these breakthroughs, customers want vehicles to remain attractive, competitive, safe, and of course, they want to continue to have driving pleasure. It is quite obvious that the regulatory environment is going to change, and of course, we will have to adapt not only to these new technologies, but it's going to become much tougher and much stricter in terms of emissions. The alliance, which today includes Mitsubishi Motors, sells one car out of every 9 sold worldwide. The size is a necessary lever, but not a sufficient one. It gives us an advantage on many of our competitors, and certainly it does not handicap us vis-à-vis anyone. This means that we do not have to make difficult choices or compromises in the answers that we contribute to the profound and accelerated changes in our sector. We don't have to make we don't have to leave aside anything. We can develop everything we want to do because of the alliance. Now, our strategic plan, Drive the Change, which has given us a perfect score, and it is on this base, which is a much more robust one, that our next strategic plan, which will go up to 2022, will be building Renault's future. We plan to achieve 70 billion euros of turnover with a minimum margin of 7% at the end of the plan, while at the same time maintaining a positive free cash flow every year. The durability of our performance in terms of growth and profit will be the major objectives of our next plan. Today, we are working within the alliance with Nissan and Mitsubishi Motors to develop our technologies and to increase our synergies together. This will, of course, be the keystone of the next generation of our products and services. I will share the details of the next strategic plan of Renault with you in October, and that is the plan that will guide Renault and its partners throughout the next 6 years. Renault has fulfilled all the objectives of the current plan with 1 year, with a year ahead of time, and you expect that Renault and the alliance will perform in the years to come with the same determination. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. We can have the questions now, but please introduce yourselves and one question at a time, please. Alain Gabriel Verdevoix from Challengers. 10 years ago, you said that the Mégane Scénic line was 50% of the profits of Renault. What's the breakdown like today? Is it the case that all the models of the product range are all models profitable? Yes, well, 10 years ago, we were very much dependent on France, first of all, and on Scenic. And so if you left out profits made in France, and if you left out Scenic, well, there was almost no profitability in the company at all. Now, of course, the situation has changed dramatically since we are profitable in all parts of the world, I think, without exception. Now, needless to say, Europe continues to play a major role, but one thing I can tell you is that profitability in Europe is no longer dependent on a single product. We have strong profits coming from Dacia. The A and B segment have become very profitable thanks mostly to Clio and Captur, and Mégane and Scenic, of course, remain profitable. They are the flagships of the company, and then we have restored profitability in LCVs. And so throughout the range, and I can assure you that in terms of marginal profit, we're even making money on electric cars. So we have a very healthy situation throughout Europe. But not just that. If you look outside Europe, we are also profitable. But of course, these other markets have been hampered because in Russia, for instance, what you have is a significant drop, a decline in the Russian market. Indeed, Russia, prior to its decline, was Renault's most profitable market. And so we certainly expect that with a resumption of Russia's fortunes, we will renew with profits on a wider basis because of Aftergas. Brazil, likewise, is going down right now, but we're still profitable. And South America is making a contribution. But of course, as I said, Brazil is down. But the minute Brazil picks up again, we should find healthy profits again. And China is a sort of El Dorado for all car makers. We only have a marginal presence there. We only sell a few dozen thousand cars, but we are profitable there, and the profitability of China is well established. In fact, in years to come, China is going to play a growing role. So we have redressed the balance, not just in terms of the Renault profit heat map, as it were. There's no part of the world where we lose money, and there's no product, indeed, no product is not profitable. All products are profitable, and all regions are profitable. There's one point to be made for electric cars. We do not depreciate all of the capex. We're talking about marginal profits on the cars that we sell right now. This gentleman now from AFP. Tanguy Semaner from AFP. I have a question about Dieselgate. After Bercy's announcement yesterday, we have the first 3 car makers in France that may be taken to court, including Renault. But for you, the fact that there is a sort of generalized suspicion vis-à-vis car makers, and of course, you may remember the Commission Royale trying to restore confidence. Is confidence being restored?
Well, I think that we need to wait for what the court says. That is the objective, after all, is to say we are going to let the courts decide. But now it's true that there are 3 or 4 groups, because we have Fiat, us, PSA, and Volkswagen. So that's 4 groups now that have been involved. So let's see what happens. We don't know what's in that dossier. You know, we've just said that we have never cheated. Renault has never cheated. That's quite clear. There are certain improvements that need to be made better. We are in real conditions of use, and we've decided that we are going to do all we can to help that. And we've told the French administration our vehicles have been studied closely in France, in the UK, in Korea, in several countries. So I think that the only way for customer confidence to come back is for us to be open and honest. So we're going to collaborate with the French state and with the courts, and we will see how things go. However, there is something that is happening on the market today, which is that the share of diesel engines is coming down. The rate of diesel engines sold in Europe is coming down, and France is not an exception, because for the very first time, the number of vehicles sold, 50%, less than 50% are diesel engines. So obviously, consumers are asking themselves questions about diesel. And you know how consumers reason. They think, well, what's the price of the car? Is the car, has it got type approval, and what is my residual value? Because you know what's going to happen in 4 years' time with this technology. Because if this technology is declining, that means that the resale value of my car is going to become lower. And therefore, you have people who are already making arbitrations and who are deciding to buy other technologies, either plug-in hybrids or petrol engines or electric cars. So we are neutral, of course, because we have a strong diesel range, but we also have a very strong petrol range. And we have an electric vehicle range that is doing well. And now with Mitsubishi, we're going to have a plug-in hybrid range as well. So we have a neutral range. Of course, we would like more and more customers to buy electric cars because we are leaders in that technology and we want to push that forward. But we are not giving up on any technology, although we do realize that the diesel engine is going to have a more difficult future. We have another question here. Franck Boisis for Liberation. My question actually extends what you've just talked about. You talked about 3 risks in your presentation that you've identified. Wouldn't you be tempted to add a 4th risk, which is a legal one? Do you plan to set aside provisions for any fines that you might have to pay, or any other actions, maybe class actions suits brought by consumers? Okay, Mr. Ghosn. Well, you know, to set aside provision, you need facts that you can assess on, because our auditors will not allow us to provision expenses for things that are not based on facts. And there are actually only 2 facts today. The first thing is that the content of the dossier that has been given to the courts is something that we are not familiar with, and that's quite normal. We don't know what's in it. So we don't really know what it's all about. And we suppose that for the other car makers, it's exactly the same thing. But we do know is what is in our engines, and that is something that we really know very well, very thoroughly. And when we look at what's in our engines, we do not need to provision. So there's no provisioning for that, because all of our cars have their type approval. We respect the rules, so there's no problem. The discussion today is that outside of the homologation conditions, what are the real rates of emissions? But there are no regulations on that. There will be soon, because we have new European regulations that are coming out, which will not just give you a level of emissions for homologation, but also they will look at real driving emissions. So obviously, everyone will have to be compliant with that, because no car maker will take the risk of not respecting that. However, the consequence of that will mean that diesel technology is going to become more expensive, and therefore diesel engines will obviously fall even further out of favor compared to petrol engines or hybrid cars, plug-in hybrids, and electric cars. So I can't set aside provisions when I know that there is nothing in our engines that will cause any problems. And I have no material facts that I can use to justify those provisions vis-à-vis our auditors. So I think we will just wait. Sorry, the gentleman is not using a microphone. So, well, as far as customer confidence is concerned, the only thing we can do and the best thing we can do is to be open and honest and above board about everything we do. And we've cooperated very closely with the French authorities, and they have said so. And at several times, the ministry has told us that our collaboration has been satisfactory, and we will do the same with the courts. But today, we don't see why we should set aside any provisions. We'll take an internet question, please. How is the arrival of Mitsubishi Motors going to profit Renault? Mr. GHOSN. Well, Renault is going to take, actually the arrival of Mitsubishi Motors in the alliance is going to be very positive for Renault. We have a lot of new synergies that are being prepared. Right now, what we're doing is taking an inventory of what is possible. You know that Mitsubishi is a small company compared to Renault and Nissan. And Nissan is just ending its synergies plan with Mitsubishi, and Renault is looking at what the priorities are for the development of synergies. And I can already tell you that there will be a lot of synergies. And they will, of course, concern purchasing. They will also concern geographic cooperation in zones where the strengths of the two companies will balance each other. I'll give you an example. In Southeast Asia, Renault is not present, and Mitsubishi has a big commercial presence, but Mitsubishi doesn't have the right products, and we do. So as you can see, we have a lot of Renault products that can be given to Mitsubishi, which will cut down on Renault's costs and investments, but will also ensure that Mitsubishi can take off very well. Mitsubishi also does not have a bank in Europe. Mitsubishi sells 80 to 90,000 cars in Europe. So RCI is very ready to finance the sales of Mitsubishi. RCI will obviously have a much better loan proposal than the entities that Mitsubishi works with today. So it's a win-win situation for Mitsubishi and for RCI. So I can quote lots of points like this. Cooperation will take place even if there is no exchange of participation or shareholding. So the shareholding is quite independent of operational exchanges and operational cooperation. Yes, Maxime from Les Echos. I have two short questions. On the QUID program, what is the level of contribution to the Renault operations? Because after all, the price positioning is quite low. And what's going to happen with the other models on the platform as well? And the second question is, you said to the analysts this morning that Nissan would not accept any capital movements as long as the French state is the shareholder of Renault. Well, look, let's put this into the context. The question was, do you see any movements of capital within the alliance? I said no. And he said, why? So I said, well, I just reminded him of the historical context. When we had the discussion on the agreement, Nissan said very clearly, because there were rumors that there would be a merger at that time, and Nissan said very clearly that it was not envisageable with the state being shareholder of Renault and therefore of the alliance. But, we don't choose our shareholders. We live with them. And today we have a relationship which is complicated but constructive. And that's it, really. So I just repeated something at that point, which was a historic fact. Because I was answering an analyst's question, because he wanted to know whether the shareholding structure was going to change. And the first question was the contribution of Quid. Yes, it is positive. So not only does it have a positive contribution, but what I can tell you is that right now, with the changes in India, and especially with the launch of the Quid in Brazil, in South America, we think that the operational profit of the Quid will be above the average of the group. Thank you. Thomas Hanke, I have a question concerning the risks you mentioned. You talked about the Brexit and the trade agreements. Did you not get a guarantee from the British government that they would take into consideration any negative effects of the Brexit? Because after that, there was a denial, so we don't really know how things are going for that. Will you be maintaining the plant there? And what about the trade agreements? Was that just a euphemism, talking about the threats of Mr. Trump?
Regarding question number one, I had a meeting with the British Prime Minister, and I came out of that meeting reassured, which enabled me to reassure the board of Nissan and to continue investing in England. The rest, of course, is beyond my control. And it is for the British government to reassure the people, not for me. But I was able to reassure the people I report to, that is the board of directors of the companies I work for. So we went to England and we said that Sunderland is a European plant based in Britain. And so the relations between Europe and Britain are, of course, essential. For the time being, Brexit is a virtual thing because the status quo is that Britain is part of the EU as we speak, and trade continues. And so we do not know what Brexit means for us as industrialists. We do not know whether there will be tariffs. We do not know whether there will be quotas. We don't know, and we can't say. But we do agree with the British government to say that, well, our investment is based on the idea that the competitiveness of this plant, which is a European plant based in Britain, that competitiveness should be preserved. And so our capacity, our commitment in terms of investment is based on that. And there's no misunderstanding there. What I certainly hope is that the Prime Minister, the British Prime Minister, keeps this in mind when negotiating Brexit, and she referred to the motor industry as a concern, and that talks should also enable the automotive industry to remain competitive. Our trade agreements, well, look, when referring to, things are uncertain, look at one continent that is, of course, in the limelight now, North America. Right now, NAFTA governs all trade relations between Mexico, the US, and Canada. But NAFTA brought about another trade agreement between Mexico and the rest of South America. Now, right now, there's reason to believe that NAFTA itself will be renegotiated. If it's not the case, fine. But if it is, well, then there's uncertainty because we do not know what the outcome will be. We do not know whether there will be an outcome. And if there is, we do not know what it will be. So referring to uncertainty, that's what I meant. Now, this may not happen in 2017 because usually these talks take time. And but of course, whatever comes out will have an effect on all automotive manufacturers, including Renault, because we have a plant in Mexico that was built there precisely to have local content in Mexico. And of course, if NAFTA is renegotiated, well, then that might upset the apple cart. Well, that's just one example, but there are other examples of trade agreements which may put us in an uncomfortable position. For instance, relations between Argentina and Brazil. Well, that is, of course, critical. Likewise, trade agreements in North African countries, well, inevitably have consequences for us. Look at Algeria. Iran is yet another example of a country where if the present trade agreement, well, the trade agreement that was supposed to be signed between the US and Iran, if that is challenged, well, that will create more uncertainty. So referring to uncertainties on trade agreements, that's what I meant. I'm not saying that we have conflicts at hand, but there may be renegotiations that may result in either good news or bad news. We tend, of course, it's our business to look at risks and see how we can hedge for such risks. Internet question. A question regarding Spain. This year, the manufacturing plan for 2017-2020, what does it mean in terms of cars and plants? Is Renault going to build Nissan cars in Spain? Well, Spain, as an industrial base, is expanding. The industrial base is expanding, and indeed, we will continue our development in Spain. Regarding exchanges between car vendors, these are not an obligation, but they are an opportunity. If Nissan or indeed Renault find that they are turning at full capacity and there are capacities in a at a partner's plant, well, we'll use that capacity. The big unknown now is how will Mitsubishi be taken on board in European capacities. Maybe we can arrive at a better deal with Mitsubishi, that is build their cars locally at lower cost and make them more competitive. We haven't, that's not happening yet in our European plants, either indeed in France or in Spain. But in Spain, I can assure you that our manufacturing capacity will grow and production should grow precisely based on what's in the cart. A question on the right-hand side. I'm from Wirtschaftswoche. My name is Karin. You referred to the attitude of French consumers regarding diesel cars, or consumers in general. To what extent will this have an effect on the Renault range in the 5 or 10 years to come? Are you going to reduce that range? And the answer is yes. Well, yes, obviously the diesel offer will be reduced, will be smaller. Because, emissions rules mean that we have to focus on a smaller number of engines. Otherwise, we're looking at huge investment. And B, in any case, we are looking at fewer cars, diesel cars being bought. Well, it's not going to be uniform decline because German manufacturers are more confident because high-end cars, diesel cars, are resisting. But the smaller or the mid-range cars are going to become less competitive. So depending on the segment, there will be different results. On the A and B segment, I see a decline, a significant decline of the diesel cars. A small decline in the C segment, but the D and E should still be able to hold their own. Emmanuel Leur from Le Figaro, in its report in the Court of Accounts, Renault said that the increase in capital of the government in Renault's capital was an insider deal, and now the head of the government agency says this was not true. Do you maintain your position? Well, if Renault made a statement based on facts that are not true, well, then of course we will correct this, and I ask our legal department to see just when things did happen, and I do maintain the fact that whatever is untrue will be corrected, but whatever is true will be maintained. Florence Lagarde from Auto Actif. Can you tell us, in terms of productivity, can you tell us about French sites? Have they improved? Where do they stand? Looking at profitable flows, is France one of the profitable countries? And you can tell us the share of sales to partners in your revenue and in your profit margin. Well, French sites, we have an annual top 10 where all all industrials, all manufacturing sites, but all our sales centers in our R&D centers are ranked. Of course, the top 50 is, I don't know how many, it's the top 50. So that includes Nissan, Renault, Afterwas, everybody. And we rank them according specific objectives on cost, on quality, punctuality, etc. Now then, French sites, well, you cannot generalize. You have some very good sites and some not so good at all. And you cannot just describe French sites as a class. I will list the good ones rather than the bad ones. You might find out, but not from me. Any case, Maubeuge has an outstanding performance. Maubeuge is right there at the top of the group's manufacturing sites. So you may well be a very effective plant and be French. Maubeuge is a case in point. It ranks among the 10 finest plants in the group. And it competes with plants, say, in China, producing 600,000 cars a year, or indeed plants in Mexico building as many cars. So you're looking at powerhouses building cars around the world. And then some sites are not as good. Some stand in the average, and some are not very good. Now, what I can tell you is that all sites are improving, precisely because of the competitiveness agreement that was signed. Everybody has become aware that it's not enough to have a will. There's got to be a way. And so all sites are making great strides in terms of productivity. And one of the great provisions of the competitiveness agreement is that we are moving from 63 cars per employee to 90 cars per worker in our French plant. But of course, that agreement means that we improve the productivity of all our sites. And Mr. de los Sponsors told us that in Maubeuge we stand at 95 cars per employee. So we're starting above the target, and even that is on the up. So French plants are improving. There's a mixed bag. Some are not good, and some are very good. And Maubeuge, of course, is cited as an example. It is a benchmark for all other plants to take after. Now, of course, the Sandouville and Douai, Cléon, of course, are major, are critical plants because they build the core of our offer. So this real hard work is being done, to modernize equipment, train our staff, our people, benchmarking against other plants to push our French plants right up to the top. The second question, I believe, is for Mrs. Delbos, the percentage in our revenue of sales to partners. Anywhere between 10 and 15% is the answer. Having said that, this percentage is going to grow. If you look, as our revenue increases, that share will also increase because revenue is partly due to our own cars, of course, but those that we build for partners. If there are no further questions, thank you very much. The press department is here at your disposal. Thank you.